Hey guys, it's Oli from Rad Season. I'm excited to be joined today by race director and founder of Elevated Action Sports, Matt Musgrove. Matt, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Ollie. It's exciting to finally talk to you. I know we've kind of been communicating over the past few years since you got your business started, and I got mine, and it's cool to kind of catch up on seeing how things are going.
Cool, man. And where are you at the moment, dude?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area right now,
Uh-huh.
California.
Nice. And what's the situation been like?
It's been
Everything going on?
California's a little funky. It's we had a stay-at-home order for a little bit, but we have right now they're just recommending people to wear masks and try not to be in public places too often. But
Mhm.
it's sad because like a lot of businesses are shutting down, and it's been rough for the economy. So, and especially for event producers and people involved in events like yourself, it's been really rough. So we just try to make do. Picking up side work and trying to stay busy with other projects. It's weird since this has happened. I've almost taken on more projects, because of the absence of those other events. So it's exciting. It's not necessarily the best thing, but I can't complain and try to make the best out of it.
Nice one, man. And what sort of other projects have you been doing?
So there's some new events that we're a part of. We're working on our series, of course, and that we just got a new venue. We're working with the Billings Motorcycle Club in Montana in a couple weeks with our series, the IRC Motoclimb Super Series. So
Mhm.
that's exciting. Our first race up in Billings, and then we got some bike projects where we work on custom open bikes for Motoclimb, and so we do some fabrication work for those. And now also like this past July, we were supposed to be in France, bringing the USA Motoclimb team over to France, 4 riders from America, but obviously that canceled. So we're building bikes for next year's event and getting prepped for that.
Nice. Yeah, man, I'd love to, I guess, jump back to where you got involved in motor climb and, like, because you started Elevated Action Sports, what, it was like 5 years ago? It's kind of the
Yeah,
same sort of time that I started Rad Season, I think, right?
exactly. It was close to when you started, and let's see, it was a buddy and I in college. It was a friend of mine, his brother and I partnered up for our first event. We wanted to put on an event here at a local hill and try to make things better or do things differently. And so we put on that race event, that hill climb event, and it didn't go super well, but we ended up parting ways after that, which I ended up with Elevated Action Sports, and it kind of was like I had a lot of directions. I could have gone motocross, I could have done other things, or I could have just I'm a welder, so I could have just kept welding. And um,
Mhm.
but I decided to pursue the hill climb sport because I just saw there was something missing, and so I went to a race one time, and I brought my camera because I grew up doing photography, and I started video filming these races. And I just was like, why is no one else here filming? And it was, at other races, people do film. I'm not saying I was the only one, but at this race, I was pretty much the only one filming. And that opened up my eyes to like, wow, these athletes aren't getting any exposure, or they aren't getting the exposure they deserve. Like they're riding 200 horsepower dirt bikes up 800-foot hills, going 60 miles an hour, flipping off their bikes. Bikes are catching on fire. It's insanity. Why aren't they getting more exposure? And then I recognized social media and video is the future for the sport. Um, Digging into it a little more, I started recognizing that hill climb, the word hill climb, isn't really just our sport. The world's biggest hill climb, you probably know, is Pikes Peak in Colorado.
Mhm.
The Pikes Peak hill climb is gigantic. It's an automotive hill climb with car racing, and people from around the world race it. But that's nothing to do with motorcycle hill climbing. Motorcycle hill climbing has been around since early 1900s. It's one of the first motorcycle dirt sports, and so it deserves recognition. But there's bicycling hill climb. There's a California World Hill Climb Champ or a California Hill Climb Championship, but it's for bicycling. There's all types of hill climbs for ATVs, and it doesn't define our sport with motorcycles, and it doesn't give our athletes the recognition using that name. So you Google hill climb and you'll get just a bunch of random searches. You a hashtag hill climb, you'll get a bunch of random searches, but never our athletes. And so I came up with the term motoclimb, combining the motorcycle hill climb names, and trademarked it as a name that we're going to brand the sport as, and we're going to brand these athletes as a part of the sport, because it'll be used as a tool to let them be recognized. And on top of hill climb not being like easily found on searches and in the industry, hill climb hasn't really been respected as much as a sport. Motorcycle hill climb, it's kind of been recognized as a redneck sport. These guys are wearing jeans with all funky bikes, and the sport has evolved over the past couple decades a lot more than that. These bikes look factory, they're extremely well tuned, the athletes are looking great in the newest gear, and they're doing things that are, insane on bikes. So I didn't see the sport as a redneck sport, and a lot of industry recognizes hill climb as kind of a redneck sport. And so I wanted to offer a chance for the sport to maybe rebrand into something different. And motoclimb is that. And I knew it wasn't going to be a quick process. It was going to take years. And here we are 3-4 years later, and we're still kind of facing some backlash a little bit. But I feel like we're making progress. And in conversation, I still use the word hill climb. It's used within our community. I don't have issues with that. What I have issues is our outside perspective. We want to be as something different, as something unique, and we want to be able to be searched and our athletes to be recognized.
Nice. And before you were sort of looking into this, I mean, was it split in the US between, say, East and West? I mean, what was the dynamics of hill climb and the races?
So that's hurt the sport for some time as well, hurt the growth of it. On the East Coast, the AMA, American Motorcyclist Association, they run an East Coast style racing, which most of the hills are kind of straighter with more stair steps. They're really fast. Guys use really powerful nitro bikes. It's like a drag race. Very technical and skilled, just different type of technicality of hills. So that they run East Coast style. West Coast style are steeper, more cliffs. The bikes aren't as long. They're not as powerful for the most part. And so the West side is more technical in that sense. So there's really never, ever been a East-West Coast series that's gone from coast to coast. And on the West side, there's also been some splits in between that West Coast racing. And so there's kind of been a lot of drama involved, and it's kind of annoying, but we are where we're at. And, with the IRC Motoclimb Super Series, when we brought that into concept, we were wanting to make it coast to coast. So we partnered up with Pogues Hole, which is probably the world's biggest motorcycle hill climb. And it's just awesome. That's an amazing event in New York, Western New York. And then we partnered up with a race in Wisconsin and North Dakota, great hills as well. And my race in California, and we built the Motoclimb Super Series. And it was the first ever coast to coast, motorcycle hill climb series in over a century. I mean, the sport's been around, and there's never really been anything uniting it like that.
Nice one, man. And what's the if people don't really know much about hill climb, and what are the rules within the races? Are there different rules depending on the competition, or?
Yeah, so good question. Our sport's unique because a lot of the riders, you go to motocross or enduro and they got one bike and a practice bike. You go to our sport and our guys are, they have 3 race bikes because there's 3 different classes, and they're spending big money on that stuff. And that's another thing that hurts our sport, is there's not a lot of funding. So we need funding so these guys can afford a race. And so these guys are in our series. We have 2 classes, the 450 main and the open class. And the 450 is just production 450s. They can build up the motors. They have to stay at the stock 450cc size, and build them up, use swing arm extensions. Some hills allow the paddle, some hills don't, but they do qualifying 2 runs, fastest time, and then we put them in a tournament bracket. And from the bracket, they go from top 32 to top 16 to top 8 to top 4, and they go head to head. So it's super exciting, the 450 bikes. And that's really good because you could buy those bikes off the production floor and just put swing arm extensions on and start racing. Our other class, our premier class, is the open class, and that is where 600 cc's or more, multi-cylinder, and just kind of whatever goes. You can have nitromethane, you can have alcohol, you can have methanol, you can have just pump gas, race gas, you can have turbocharge. You do whatever you want with your open bike, essentially, as long as it has a kill switch and the proper tire specs. But yeah, you can have chains in the tire, bolts, studs, whatever floats your boat, and it's an exciting class. Some of these bikes hit 300, 350 horsepower, and it's really our premier class, and that's, you get 2 runs, fastest over wins. So
nice. And I mean, what kind of steepness, like what's the gradient that these hills are doing? I mean,
I've heard things, 40 to 50% probably for our average, but some of them, have portions that hit 70% on the hill that is like a cliff. And so that gets really steep. And the hill lengths vary from like 500 to 750 feet in our series. So that's, not the vertical height, but that's the length of the course. And, the times usually go from 12 to 20 seconds.
okay. And is there within the different categories? So is there like 3 champions that are an overall winner of that series?
So typically in the US, or the existing series that we were racing before this, they would give a champion for each class. So there'd be 4 classes and they give out 3 or 4 championships. And so we wanted to kind of do away with that because we wanted to have these athletes fight for that big overall championship. So we ended up taking the 2 classes, combining them or making them into points format, kind of like pro motocross does. And the best average of 2, the rider with the best average will win the overall, and that overall will be a certain amount of points. And so at the end of the season, there will be a points battle between a few riders, hopefully, and go into the last round trying to find an overall champion. And so last year, going into Carnegie, our final round, Austin Tyler finished well in the open class, and he went into that round behind Logan Sapala, and then he did well in the open class. So he was 2 points ahead of Logan Sapala for the championship. And then they ended up meeting in the finals, the 450, and Logan Sapala passed them up and won the championship. So it was just a super exciting finish, and that's really why we created that format, so we can see that type of intensity from the athletes.
Nice. And I mean, like over the years and during the events, I mean, has there been any? It's pretty gnarly, like what these guys are doing, right? So I mean, like any sort of like crazy moments that stand out.
Yeah. Well, I'm a photographer and filmer as well, so being on the hill, I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
And, I remember Pokes Hole, I think it was 2017. Scott Wentz Jr. was riding someone else's nitro bike, and John Custer's nitro bike it was a CBR 1000 nitro bike, and the thing caught on fire. Like, it started smoking on the way to the top, and he had a good run going, but we all knew there was something wrong with the bike. And the thing almost got to the top, and it just burst into flames because it just combusted. Those nitro bikes can be very dangerous if mishandled. We had one blow up in the pits one year, and it was very scary. But another moment,
Wow.
yeah, and when I was in France with Austin Tyler in 2017, La Monte Impossible, that's another incredible event. They have a great series out there with several awesome hills and very challenging hills. I was filming about 25 feet away on this big rock with like a 15-foot drop off. And I was filming the race, and this guy just was struggling, and kind of just let go of the bike. And the bike just soared over the fence that was the course fence. And and I tried to run away, but there was a cliff there. So I kind of got pinned against this banner, and the front tire hit me. And
were you taking photos at the time? Or
yeah, I was filming it, and the bike landed on me from 25 feet away. And I got up, and the crowd was cheering, and I was fine. But the back tire, if that hit me, it had 3-inch bolts in the back, so that would have been bad. But yeah, it's a crazy sport. There's always some, our good buddy Joseph Allnut, unfortunately, he had a bad accident one year at Pogues Hole where he came off a jump on his 450 and landed on his bike because it was muddy. And he slipped and landed on his bike and sat on the peg pretty much midair, and he had a 2-inch by 2-inch chunk of meat come out of his butt. And so there's some gnarly accidents sometimes, but surprisingly compared to other sports like motocross, there's not as many. Actually kind of safer because we're usually racing against just one person or against one other person, and we don't see as many accidents.
That's good, man. And like with the growth of the sport, you mentioned there being events in France. I mean, are there other countries that are pushing it along with you guys over in the US, or?
So France is definitely like the number two. They've been doing it for decades, and it's really popular out there. They bring in big shows. They have some awesome hill venues. A lot of good riders too come from France. The surrounding areas, Switzerland, Germany, Sweden, there's some riders in Poland, and so there's a few out there in Europe in addition to France that compete at those races. But we here in the States, it's kind of by itself. Canada has some good riders that come over across the lines to race, but we don't really have any races in Canada at the moment. There have been in past decades, but yeah, when it comes down to the sport, it kind of is isolated in the US and France, and that's one goal of mine is to expand it. I had a guy in Russia I was working with a couple of years ago, trying to help him with his event, and he called it the Russian Motoclimb, and and just try to help him out. And we've talked about expanding into different countries and such, but right now we have a lot of work to do in the home front, and that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, and I mean, like working across so many different aspects of the business, from promoting athletes to organizing the races and everything else that goes with that. I mean, where do you see like are there sort of major challenges on pushing it and progression?
Major challenges are definitely finding support and getting financial backing from some of the bigger partners to convince them that this is something worth supporting. That's been a challenge of mine. It's something I've been working hard for, and I'm learning a lot about the industry doing that. Luckily, I have some great partners that have helped me get to where I'm at, but I still have a long way to go. Another thing is just getting the athletes excited about taking videos of themselves and staying active on social media and promoting them to athletes is difficult at times. And truthfully, there's only there's it's kind of a struggle to kind of go into a 100-year-old sport and try to rebrand it in a certain way. Yeah. And you receive some backlash, which hasn't really affected me in a negative way. I take that as motivation, but to try to change the mindset of people's habits. And so that's been a struggle. But yeah, it comes down to support, getting factory support. No manufacturers involved with our sport right yet. There's one team that's involved with KTM a little bit. But other than that, we're kind of just winging it and trying to do whatever we can do that's different. And it's been interesting, but yeah, not easy.
Yeah. And especially, with what's happening now, like 2020, I mean, no one can see that coming, right? Within the events industry, and like most other industries, being affected in some way. I mean, what with you guys? How many races did you have? As when this thing started off, I guess end of February time.
We had a film trip in Peru in February. I think it was early February. We came back from that. Late January, early February. So we came back from that. People were starting to wear masks at the airport going back from Peru. And we were like, this is crazy. Like, what people are wearing masks. Why? And, within a month, the state of California shut down. So we were kind of blindsided by that. But the week before the shutdown, we got in a little race at a good hill down a couple hours away. So that was fun for people to kind of get out before the shutdown started. And then, I've been to a couple races out of state. but it's just been slow, and I've been focusing on other side work and projects. But I'm also involved with the sport of hard enduro, which is much bigger. That's a internationally known, sport discipline. And so I put on Enduro Fest out here in Reno, Nevada, and that's a pretty difficult course that we set up, and we've been doing that since 2017. So yeah, that's kind of a big part of our program, as well as diversifying into hard enduro.
Okay, nice. And are those events growing, or we plan to do sort of multiple events within Jura as well, or?
Yeah, so we just do the one in Reno, and then there's other enduros I attend that are part of a series, and we kind of bounce back and forth. And the thing is, with that sport, it's established, it's growing in America, so it's kind of exciting to be a part of the growth. But it's already supported by KTM and Husky and Sherco and Beta, so there's manufacturers involved. There's more funding available. It's not easy to get the funding, but it's available, and so being a part of that, I've learned a lot. And I've also got to, cross pollinate, I guess you could say, both. So bringing enduro athletes over to Motoclimb and vice versa. So trying to do the two extreme moto sports that, that aren't super popular right now, and trying to get them more popular on my end.
And what do you see the crossover between the two?
The top enduro riders that I brought over are really good. And so one time Kyle Redmond came over. He's a top 5, top 10 hard enduro rider, and he won a class, and he top 5'd in the other classes, and he did really well. And when we have our top Motoclimb guys go over to hard enduro, it just depends on what their training regimen is. If they trail ride, they're going to be better. If they're motocross, they're going to probably struggle on the hard enduro stuff. But bike skills are bike skills, and I've seen all types of disciplines do well in hard enduro. It's just it's a good crossover to kind of introduce that sport to each other.
Nice. And are the athletes now, are they sort of looking into it and getting more involved in things like social and like their online presence and sort of pushing the sports that way?
Yeah, there's that's what we've been trying to encourage athletes to do. There's a group of athletes that have been working hard on getting their content up, and mainly with Motoclimb. Hard enduro, those guys have been kind of around and they're more established, and they have team backing. But with the Motoclimb athletes, all of them are privateers, so I try to help with content wherever possible. I don't sell my photos. I just give them to them because I know that's going to help them, which helps me in the end. Over time, it's a long-term thing, but helping out guys that care. I don't want to help out the guys that aren't going to be putting in the work, on social or their content. You don't really need to be a champion or a top 5 racer to necessarily have a big social following. You're just going to want it. You want to get it. You want to, if you could just have the best personality in the world and not finish well, and you could still have a great social. So if you want to get followers, if you want to get, sponsor support and all, it's all available to you. It's just the choice of putting in the work. And honestly, it's not easy. I don't like putting out stuff all the time myself of myself so I'm kind of glad I'm not an athlete. It's much easier putting out content with the face of a brand or company. Yeah. And so and putting out content of other athletes. But as an athlete, it's probably a hard transition to start posting about yourself all the time, and for some guys. And so some guys have kind of crossed that bridge and they're doing really well. And I try to help them here and there. And one of my best friends is Austin Tyler. He's kind of taken that and ran with it, where he's put on some vlogs of his races, and taken on video editing to himself. And he's a top 5 racer, and he really wants to film more than race. And so that's exciting that he's gotten that type of mindset, because it's really fun to work with him on certain projects, because he just gets really creative and is more about how can this help my brand, the sport, rather than how can I win, you know? So that's really long-term winning, is if he can help his brand and help the sport.
Nice. And how do you see, I mean, what are you now working on to push the sport into next year, hopefully, you know, when races start again?
Yeah, so we have our Peru trip, and earlier this year was pretty big. Austin's cousin came over from Hawaii to film with myself, and we filmed Austin with extensions. First time ever that a rider's been, I guess, motorcycle hill climbing in South America with extensions on a dirt bike.
Well,
So
where did you guys go in Peru?
we went to San Bartolo. It's like
Okay.
it's part of Lima. Have you been to Peru?
I have, yeah. I spent a couple of months over there. I went there a few years back mainly on a surf trip.
Nice.
But yeah, it's cool, man. There's some good sort of like desert just off the back of Lima and stuff, and it's sick.
Yeah. So did you go to Huacachina?
We did, yeah.
Yeah. So we're in San Bartolo, which is that surf town, like 45 minutes south of Lima. We stayed there with, at a surf little hostel, and we were partnered up with the number one hard enduro in Peru from KTM Peru. And he was super cool, Branko Bosovic, and he took us around the hills. They hooked us up with a bike that we got set up with extensions, and brought our tires over. And he took us to the best spots in San Bartolo, Santa Maria area, and just amazing. Like, it was so cool, the shots we got. And then we drove down to Huacachina and Austin. We filmed down there. We got hooked up with one of the kids whose parents own a hotel in town, and we got to just like ride in town. We rode through the town, and we did all types of crazy stuff. He took us all the way to the ocean, which was like a 2-hour drive in the sand dunes. Like, there was so many cool experiences on that trip, but the biggest thing is we got some amazing content, and content that will frankly blow people's minds, because it's so crazy, that stuff that Austin did on a extended hill climb bike. And so we're coming out with a full feature movie. We're planning on it. Austin's cousin is currently editing it. He's been working his tail off in Hawaii, editing, some drafts that Austin and I are kind of looking at and trying to decide which direction we want to go. But our goal is to have a full feature movie premiere by the end of the year. So that should be good for the sport, because I'm a big action sports junkie. I'm sure you are too. And I know you are. And you look at like downhill mountain biking or snowboarding and surfing, and all these big action sports started with films. And it didn't start with competitions necessarily. It didn't get big with competitions. All those action sports got big with videos and films of guys having fun, or guys in the hills, or guys out, traveling and different backcountry spots. And so that we're taking that way of thinking that they did decades ago, those pioneers, and we're applying that to motoclimb. And we want to really take off this sport by, we've tried racing for decades. It hasn't really got us in a good point. Let's try filming like they did decades ago in snowboarding, downhill mountain biking, and let's apply that to our sport and come out with some rad films of climbing hills no one's ever even attempted or thought of. Yeah. So kind of the direction we want to go for non-race activities.
And any other locations that you think would be a good spot?
Yeah, we have a few locations in the U.S. that we have planned out. Possibly Canada. We have a couple in mind in Europe and beyond. So there is more, and I'll probably be contacting you when it gets to that point, because you probably know a lot of people around the world.
Cool, man. Yeah, I'm just curious. I wonder if you ever do anything. So we're based over in Portugal, but yeah, if there's anything going on in Europe that side. But and what about on the events and on the enduro side of things as well for next year?
Yeah, so the events for the Super Series, I have some ideas on restructuring. We just kind of have to get our board together and come up with a plan. But we do plan on running a full season next year. Try to make it bigger and better. goal is to get a manufacturer on board to just to at least look at it and supporting. And also a big goal is to broadcast it better. I've been filming a lot of the races myself, and with a small crew I'd hire here and there. So I'd like to really broadcast it more professionally, the sport. With hard enduro, there's a lot of things up in the air right now, and I'm not quite sure which direction we're going, but I'm really excited about the sport's growth, and there's a lot of other people excited about it. So definitely going to be doing the Reno event and trying to grow it in whatever way is possible. So
nice. Cool, man. And for the remainder of the year, I mean, is there any sort of things that you guys are focusing, like apart from the film coming out, like looking at the digital side of things with events not being able to go ahead?
yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that because, this is, you've kind of had to adapt big time during this pandemic, and we've had to adapt. Obviously I've spent more time in the shop than I have done in years. So, like, working on bikes is kind of something I'm trying to focus on, because if we don't have bikes like built for other riders to ride, let's say riders like we've had Ryan Sipes or Josh Hill, like bigger sponsored riders from other sports come over to race, we don't have bikes for them. Well, then they're not going to come. So we don't allow bike sharing. So I'm trying to build up a little arsenal of bikes that we can potentially lend out to those racers. So spending a lot of time in the shop, trying to do the few events that I've been allowed to do left in the year. But when I wanted to ask you, as far as like live streaming action sports events, I know, and it's been a big thing in the music side, and obviously the business side and conferences and every which way. I know action sports is big, but also action sports depends on a live audience big time at a lot of these events. So what have you seen for the action sports world when it comes to live streaming, when these things can't host spectators?
Yeah, so the tricky thing with I guess with the live stream is having, like, for example, the WSL had a recent surfing event on at the ranch, which is like an artificial wave in California. The challenge you have there is, when there's not a crowd, is finding the production of when there's no action, right? So what are they filming? What are they doing then? And it's almost having stuff ready and having pre-recorded content to make it interesting for people to want to watch watch the live stream throughout, instead of just having ads coming in when there's no action. So that's the tricky thing. The days of this year, people like walking around the crowd and, getting that whole atmosphere and speaking to people and athletes, it's been a bit challenging. So, I mean, we're sort of seeing, we do a lot of, cover a lot of music festivals, and some of those that you see, a lot of them doing virtual events, right? And the ones it's kind of all it's sort of premeditated and just kind of going off the cuff and saying, okay, we're going to go live, and so that's what we're seeing at the moment. But also it's okay to kind of have, for it to be a bit rough and ready and around the edges, people don't really, it doesn't have to be 100% polished and all that either, right? So
it's interesting, because that's something we've obviously been trying to push for years, and now it's come to the point where we need it. And we're fortunate enough to have a company here in the States that's been live streaming a couple events here and there, and they've been doing a good job, at least, of documenting the action. But professional live streaming events is definitely a goal of ours, and we just trying to find the support and funding and resources to do that. Also, some of those are kind of remote, so finding the bandwidth to do that is tough. But if some of the downhill mountain bike races or snowboard events can do it in the middle of the mountains, and we can find ways to do it.
Yeah, and we're sort of seeing that nothing is going to replace being there and having a live event. Like a concert, a music festival, action sports event, and then it's almost having it's like forcing like what's happening at the moment is forcing that the live streaming, and going forwards, hopefully there's both, so there is that option. If you can't make it in person, then you can have a good experience watching it at home or with your mates somewhere. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see how that all evolves and how that's going to develop.
Yeah, it will be interesting and see how long this whole thing lasts. And so we're all hoping and praying that it's ends soon, but until then we just keep adapting.
Cool, man. What have you been doing? Have you been getting out on the bike and been able to get out in California at all? Or?
Good question. Unfortunately I haven't. I mean, because I'm going to Montana tomorrow, and I've been keeping my trailer there most of the summer. So when I'm in Montana, I stay at Austin Tyler's house, and they have riding behind their house. So I do trail ride with them sometimes, and that's super fun. I should be riding my mountain bike more. I haven't been. I should be going to the coast to surf more. I haven't been. So it's just kind of like, I know I do. And every time I consider going to the beach for a morning surf sesh or something, I'm like, oh shoot, I can edit a video if I do that, or I can, return these emails or do something. So it's just time management. It's something I've been struggling with. And I think a lot of people running their own program struggle with. It's time management's tough and picking and choosing. And another thing is like creating content for social. I never imagined it being so time consuming, and probably as well, especially building your website and making sure everything's up to date. And it's just like constant management of just editing, creating, and putting out and hoping people see it, and just doing it the next day over and over. And I keep on just like adding more and more to my plate. I'm on TikTok, and I'm on, I have 6 different pages on Instagram I'm supposed to be active on, and I'm not active on all of them. And it's just like, it's just kind of, I have a website that I don't keep up to date. It's just, it's
a full-time job, huh? Like just doing that alone.
Yeah. And it's like, well, what am I getting in return? And so that's kind of the struggle I have with myself sometimes. But if I don't do it, I don't see anyone else doing it. And so I wish other people were doing it. I mean, some people are starting to put out more stuff, but when it comes to our sport, I mean, it's the amount of content I've put out for our sport in the past 3-4 years is just probably surpassing a lot of other content. In the digital era, it's so easy to share stuff, and there's a lot of recorded stuff that's on VHS tapes from decades ago. But it's just I'm excited to take on the opportunity and give these guys a shot at getting exposure for bigger companies.
That's awesome. And what you guys are doing on the YouTube channel is rad, man. So I'm seeing some good footage coming out on there, and
thank you.
Yeah, it's sort of like from what you've described with the Peru trip and getting these different locations that no one's ridden before is gonna hopefully it will sort of it will expand like the audience from there as well. So
that's the goal. And on YouTube, I mean, we started a podcast as well, just kind of interviewing some of the deeper stories and stuff. And we, when it comes to the doing different things on the hillside, we're always trying to seek new venues out, and finding hills in the United States is tough because everything's so regulated, or people don't want to have their hill torn up or anything. I don't blame them sometimes. Just want to climb up the darn hill. So it's tough to find new venues, but it's something we always have our eyes out open for. So, it's just it's a bizarre time. Every year I look at, or in the beginning of the year, I tell myself, well, if I don't see substantial growth or progress, then I'm just going to cut it off and go back to a full-time gig, welding or something. And, at the end of each year, I've kind of been like, well, darn it. I'm in a spot where I've seen growth, and it's growth to where it convinces me to go another year. And, luckily I've had great partners such as IRC Tire. They've been huge in supporting, what we've done both on the hard enduro and Motoclimb side. And their guidance and just how we should look in the industry, how the direction we should go, how we should conduct ourselves has been huge. But yeah, it's just kind of a funky time to see where things are going to go. And Each year has its own challenges, but I think this year there's a lot of positive things coming up to maybe I can go another year, but I'm kind of committed to working till 2021. I just need to have next year be the year,
Yeah.
So.
And it's a good learning I'm sort of finding now of like being able to produce content when there's not much going on, and then sort of doing stuff now. It's like, okay, well, when events and festivals start again, like if we take the learnings, what we learned this year, and then put it into next year, it's positive looking at it that way, right? So
it is. Yeah. We kind of use the quote unquote downtime to put out other stuff and other things. So yeah, it's funky. And so on your end with the website, like I'm sure traffic has been down. So you're in Portugal right now. Are you stuck there? Are you?
No. So I'm in Germany at the moment. So we're visiting family. We did a road trip from Portugal to Germany.
Oh, wow.
And we moved the company from Australia and we relocated to Europe last year.
Okay.
So we chose Portugal because, mainly like sort of lifestyle. It's kind of good to be sort of based near a city, an airport. It's good surf. There's good mountain biking. It's a good place to be, and that's it.
How far away are you from Nazaré?
We're about an hour and a half from Nazaré. And that place is insane. Like we went there in February, and I've never seen waves like it. It just feels a bit surreal. You get there and it's like, what? Like you see videos of this stuff. I've been to like Puerto Escondido and in Mexico and seen big waves, but I thought there were big waves then, and then you see Nazaré and it's just, it's a monster.
I'm lucky enough to live only 45 minutes away from Mavericks, or about an hour, and I've seen it once when it was pumping. It was about probably 25 feet or so at 30 feet. And I know it gets bigger at times, but Nazaré is like, okay, let's double that or triple it. Couldn't imagine.
So hopefully they get a good winter again, which sort of starts, I don't know, the season probably starts around October, November time. If like across people can travel for it, and we'll see. But there's a good local crew that are kind of always there now when it's on, and it's just crazy to watch, man.
Amazing.
You can just stand there for take photos and have a beer or a coffee and just watch them, and
Can you feel it? Like you can feel it hit the.
It's not like when they say like with like pipeline where it kind of in Hawaii where it breaks, you kind of like just almost feel a shudder on the beach. Not like that. But I mean, like it's smashing against the rocks, and it just looks way closer than it is because you're so high up. So you're high up on the cliff, and you can sort of see it, like directly out, and
that's amazing.
And it breaks quite a lot. Like I spoke to Andrew Cotton, a big wave surfer who was on the podcast, and he was just telling me that it's not like one of these misto spots which only works a couple of times a year. It's sort of like when it's on in the season, it is working pretty regularly. So,
oh boy, I'm gonna have to.
You got to come over.
I will. Surfing's like my. That's probably my favorite. I'd take surfing over anything. It's just I suck at it, but it's so much fun and it's always challenging. And being in the ocean, there's nothing better. So, and watching surfing is always really exciting for me too. So, I really love the sport a ton over the past few years. So, I'm gonna have to check it out one of these days.
And what's the best way of people following what you're up to and seeing what's going on in the sport? Yeah,
so Elevated Action Sports on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. Instagram, every day I'm posting something, and on my stories I always share other action sports, motorsports, updates and content that I enjoy. So that's always fun for me to share things that I enjoy to other people. And then Motoclimb Super Series on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. We're active on there daily as well, as far as just putting out Motoclimb content consistently to try to grow our athletes' exposure. And, my personal is Matt Musgrove. I kind of stay semi-active on there. And then, there's some other pages, EnduroFest. But, and some others, but you stay most active on Elevated Action Sports and Instagram. Website has some, information, but it's not exciting usually.
Cool, man. Well, it's been great chatting to you, dude. And yeah, we'll be keeping a watch on everything that's going on. And yeah, good luck with getting the movie out later in the year.
Thank you so much. We'll definitely give you a heads up when it's coming, and I appreciate you taking the time out and arranging this all. And I'm glad we finally got to chat and catch up.
Thanks, man.
All right.